Before we go into the Sichos of this afternoon, there was a very, very special Farbrengen, two inyonim, which the Rebbe discussed today at length. One came in continuation to what the Rebbe spoke about last week, where the Rebbe came out very strong last week, how we are to be besimcha and bring Mashiach through simcha. In other words, the Rebbe explained last week at length, we have tried through many ways already, and it did not work. Mashiach is still not here. Let us try with simcha, through simcha. The Rebbe expressed himself last week. Let's try. And through simcha we will bring Mashiach. This is one inyan which the Rebbe discussed at length in today's Farbrengen, as we will relate in a few more minutes. Another inyan which the Rebbe spoke about this week, the groundbreaking of 770 for the expansion of 770, as well as during the week. During the week, the Rebbe spoke Wednesday night and Thursday night. The Rebbe was on the oil both days, Wednesday and Thursday, and after Meir, both of the days the Rebbe spoke. And it was on one of the nights with the Rebbe, in conjunction to the expansion of the groundbreaking for the expansion of 770, the Rebbe urged very strongly that this is an opportune year. It's a very special year. It's a year of Shnas Tismach with the Samach. It's a Hakel year. The Rebbe urged very strongly to utilize the remainder of the year to build buildings. Naturally, a building cannot be built in the remainder of this year, but at least to start, or whatever possible, to erect new buildings, public buildings, college buildings, this is shuls, yeshivas, houses of Torah, houses of Tefillah, houses of Gebbelas Chesed, as well as private homes as well.
770 buildings.
Rebbe stressed very strongly when he spoke one of the nights this week, based on a pasuk, Uvonisa Lashem Elikecha, that when a Yid builds something, he has to know, even though he's building it, it's a private home, it's a house, Divrei Rishus, as they refer to. Divrei Rishus means things which are for our own permissive use. But at the same time, a Yid has to know that everything that he does has to be permeated with Getlichkeit. Pasuk in this week's Seder in the Pasha of Revi, Uvanisa Sham Mizbeach Lashem Elokecha, thou shalt build there a Mizbeach to Hashem Elokecha. Kapitel Chav Zayin. The Rebbe referred to it, not necessarily does it only refer to a Mizbeach, but anything that a Yid builds, anything that a Yid undertakes, has to be Lashem Elokecha. And again, today, in getting back to today's Farbrengen, it was felt very much, the Rebbe was stressing and demanding the concept of simcha. And through simcha, we could accomplish tremendous inyanim. Just give a little description. It was before the Farbrengen. Hersh Gansberg announced, he's the fellow that usually starts the Regunim between the Sichos, that the Friedeker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, came out with a famous model of La'alta L'Tshuva, La'alta L'Gula, which the Rebbe discussed last week. How demanding that we immediately do Tshuva, and this will lead to the Yula. And back in the early 1940s, when the previous Rebbe arrived here in the United States, he came out with several Koil Koiros, with several proclamations, open pleas, requests, letters, and in one of them he uses the expression Sisu v'simchu b'simchas ha'geula, that Yidden should rejoice with the simcha that the Geula is about to come. He related that it was at that time when this letter reached Eretz Yisrael, there was a Chassidish Yid in Eretz Yisrael by the name of Rav Nechol Dvorkin. So the Farbrengen was a real, very, very extreme Chassidish Yid. Just our own knowledge is the famous nigun which we sing, Niet, Niet, Niet Kavo, which the Russian words. Meaning of these words are Ein Oid Milvadoi. There's no one other than him, other than the Rabbeinu Shalom. The Rebbe once in the Farbrengen related the origin of this nigun. It was when the previous Rebbe, Frierdiker Rebbe, was released from prison, and he was sent off to Kostroma. And then on his base Tammuz, he was told that he's being released and he can return back and unite back with his family and with his Chassidim. There was one chassid that was with the Rebbe in the town of Kostroma. This was this chassid, Reb Michal Dvorkin. When Michal Dvorkin heard of the news that the Rebbe was released, he immediately began dancing with this nigun on the roof of the house where he stood. The house in Kostroma where they stood, got onto the roof and began dancing around the roof out of expression of great simcha. Niet, niet, niet kavo, which means there's no other than him, other than Rabbeinu Shalom. It was his expressing thanks to the Eibishter for the release of the Rebbe. And this same person later he immigrated here to the United States. He passed away here in America. He was a very Chassidish Yid, dedicated chassid. So at that time he came up with this nigun also, the saying Sisa v'simchu v'simchas hagiyullah hine hine Mashiach ba. This was the nigun which we heard today in the Farbrengen. Later when the Rebbe walked out tonight from Erev, it's in response to the Rebbe's demanding that we will bring Mashiach through simcha. And let us review a little bit what the Rebbe spoke. The Rebbe began the Farbrengen that in general, Shabbos has a shaykhs to simcha. There's a sifri based on the pasuk Uvayom Simchaschem, your days of simcha. So the sifri interprets, what does it mean? Elu HaShabbos. This refers to the days of Shabbos. However, Shabbos simcha is not bigoli. What is more stressed Shabbos is the concept of oineg. The difference between simcha and oineg is simcha is more of a happiness which can be seen to the outsider, as opposed to oineg, which expresses more an inner feeling of joy. However, when Shabbos should come out on a day of a yontif, when Shabbos and yontif come together, then naturally we see the simcha in a much stronger way, because Shabbos and Yontif both come out on a Shabbos. Especially these days, the days that we are in. I spoke about last week at length that last Friday was the day of the wedding of the previous Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe. So, Frierdiker Rebbe got married. His father, the Rebbe Rashab, began saying a maimer, Samach te Samach Re'em Mo'ahudim. This maimer he did not say only at the wedding. This maimer, it's printed today. This maimer was said at several occasions, continued throughout Sheva Brachos. Chassidish vocabulary, it's called a hemshech. It was said in continuations. It wasn't a maimer which was not said at one time, it was said in continuations. So in that maimer, he also stresses the importance of simcha in general. So we are within the days, close days, when the maimer of Samach to Samach was said.
When was it said?
I just said Yud Gimel Elul, 13 days in Elul, which was last Friday. But it wasn't just a one-time saying, it was said in continuations, which means he said it throughout the week, throughout the Sheva Brachos week. So this week, these are the days when the Samach to Samach maimer was said, which again stresses the inyan of simcha, and how much simcha we had before Shabbos. Now that it comes Shabbos, we have to increase in simcha. And this also is appropriate to the Seder of the week. This week's Seder we read at the beginning of the Seder regarding Bikurim. And the pasuk goes on saying,
When a Yid brings his Bikurim, which is the first of the fruits that have grown, and in his expression of thanks to the Rebishter, he brings it to Yerushalayim. So the Pasuk says, "V'samachta lefnei Hashem Elokecha," that you shall rejoice in front of the Rebishter, before the Rebishter. So it's again, the Sedra is also demanding the inyan of Simcha. We look into the Likutei Torah, which is the Rebbe calls it the Chassidische Parsha, the Chassidische Sedra, the Mamarim Likutei Torah, which corresponds to Parshas Kisavai. So there too, the Alter Rebbe explains that there are various levels in Simcha. And then there's a level of Simcha which has a shaychus to tzaddikim. But as we say in Pirkei Avos, "Ve'ameich kulam tzaddikim." So really, all levels of Simcha, even the highest level of Simcha, has a shaychus to each and every Yid. We look into this week's Sedra, as just mentioned. The beginning of the Sedra discusses an inyan of Simcha. The end of the Sedra discusses also Simcha. But though in the middle of the Sedra, there is an inyan which we do not see obviously how it is the inyan of Simcha. And this the Rebbe means the inyan of the Teichacha, the Parsha which Teichacha means curse, Chas v'Shalom. So here we have a part which is not Simcha. Here the Rebbe referred that there's a story told that not regularly the Alter Rebbe was the Bal Kriya. He would read the Torah in the Shul. Once the Alter Rebbe was away, and it came out to be a week which the Sedra was either Kisavai or Bechukaisai, a Sedra which has the Teichacha in it. When the Alter Rebbe's son, the Mittler Rebbe, heard all these psukim of the Teichacha, it affected him so that he chalish, that he fainted. Heard such harsh words, so he fainted. After he came back to himself, after he calmed down, so he was asked, "Why did you faint?" He says, "Why not? I heard such strong words. How did you expect me? How could anybody hold out such words?" So they tell him, "But this is not the first time you hear it. Every year when it comes to Kriyas HaTorah, it's read twice a year. It's not the first time you hear it." He says, when the Tate leint, referring to his father, the Alter Rebbe, when the Tate leint is gar anders. In other words, when his father reads it, then he doesn't hear it as words of curse, then he hears it as words of bracha. The truth is, there's a Chassidus, it's explained that the entire Teichacha is not Chas v'Shalom meaning of curse. It's such deep brachas that cannot be explained in words of bracha, so that is why it's explained in the opposite way, but really it only contains bracha. We're not going to get into it now. I use this story today. He says, based on these words of the Mittler Rebbe, as when the Tate leint is gar anders. So when we realize that the Tate is Avinu Shabashamayim, the Rebbeinu Shalom, so then is gar anders. So when we realize that everything comes from Hashem, then it's completely different, and the entire Sedra is really a Sedra of Simcha. Especially that we're coming in the Shabbos that follows Chayil. Chayil was also this special day, the day that the Shnei HaMa'irus HaGdolim, the two that illuminated the world, the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe were born on this day. So naturally, that this also has to add to increase in our Simcha. When we say Baal Shem Tov, that he was a Baal, he had the control on the Shem Tov, on the good name. Rebbe explained. The inyan of Shem Tov we find in this week's Perek. Pirkei Avos, which we recited this afternoon, the Mishnah says, Shloisha Ksarim, that there are 3 crowns. And the Mishnah lists them, Keser Kahuna, Keser Torah, and Keser Malchus. Then the Mishnah says, Keser Shem Tov Oila Al Gabeim. So the question arises, the Mishnah really talks about 4 different types of crowns. Why does the Mishnah use the expression Shloisha Ksarim? Mishnah starts off Shloisha Ksarim, tells us about Keser Torah, Keser Kahuna, Keser Malchus. Then the Mishnah concludes, Keser Shem Tov Oila Al Gabeim. So if the Mishnah is talking about 4 types of crowns, the Mishnah should have began Al-Bo Ksarim. So it's explained in Chassidus that what's the inyan of the Keser Shem Tov? Keser Shem Tov is something which a person can really achieve to on his own. This is the area which is left to him totally to build by himself. When we're talking about Keser Malchus, we're talking about Keser Kahuna, this is something which comes by Yerusha. Even Keser Torah, So in Torah it's explained in Chassidus that there are various levels. There's a madrega in Torah that comes in inheritance. There's a level in Torah in which a person has to sweat and work heavy on. But Keser Shem Tov, this is fully dependent on the person himself. The Indian of Shem Tov, this is something which he has to build up on his own. And when he builds it up on his own, then this supersedes all three Ksavim. Rabbi compared it like the Neshama. The Neshama, before the Neshama comes down into this world, the Neshama is called an Oimed. It stands still on one place. Once the Neshama has fulfilled its mission and comes down on this place and comes down on this world and is successful, then the Neshama is no longer called an Oimed. The Neshama has reached the level of a Mahalech, of going higher and higher. The same when we're talking about the Keser Shem Tov, originally it's in the Madrege of an Oimed. But when the person develops it and puts it into action, this Keser Shem Tov is Oila Al Gabei, and it becomes a Mahalach and supersedes all the other Ksavim, all three other Ksavim which the Mishnah talks about. And the Baal Shem Tov was the one that instructed and demanded very much the Inyan of Simcha, to such an extent that a person always has to be b'simcha. Why? Because of the fact that he's an Oived Hashem, because he's serving the Rebishter. Rabbi concluded that the V'hachai Yiten Elibay, which means the Hira, the lesson which we can derive from all this, that what's Negeya, Lamaise, that should be b'simcha, and not just think about simcha or debate about being b'simcha and have all kinds of plans of being b'simcha, but when we're talking about simcha, we mean simcha in reality, to such an extent that his thinking is also permeated with simcha, and in reality he also has simcha. In other words, the simcha should affect the person fully. And that the highest giluy, a person shouldn't satisfy himself by saying that he can accomplish or achieve all different types of things and all different types of madrigas. It does not come, and in no way does it compare to the Inyan of Simcha. Simcha is a tremendous way how a person can serve the Rebishter through Simcha and accomplish tremendous Inyanim through Simcha. And here we come back to this week's Chazarah. And this week's Chazarah, as mentioned earlier, we learn about Bikurim. And Bikurim also is something which brings to joy, to Simcha. As the pasuk goes on saying, "V'samachta l'fnei Hashem Elokecha." So if we look into Rashi, first Rashi in the Chazarah, what does Rashi tell us? That when were the Yidden obligated to bring Bikurim? Ad shekifshu sa'aretz v'chalkuah. Once they captured and conquered the entire land, and they divided the land. We know, how long did it take for the Yidden to capture the land? It took them 7 years. How long did it take it for them to divide the land? It again took them 7 years. So what Rashi is really saying, that when did the mitzvah of Bikurim get into effect? It took 14 years after being in Eretz Yisrael that they were able to bring the first Bikurim. Normally we learn the Parsha, Pasuk says, as soon as you will enter the land, you will go ahead and bring Bikurim. So Rashi is putting like a kind of a limitation to the thing. It says, no, doesn't mean that immediately when you enter Eretz Yisrael, you right away brought Bikurim. When did you bring Bikurim? After you went through, there were a lot of things to take care of before. You had to conquer the land and divide the land. And once you were settled in Eretz Yisrael, that is when you brought Bikurim. So the question arises, we're learning Pshat, and Pshat shel Mikra, and the simple understanding of the pasuk. Where is there an indication here that it has to be after Eretz Yisrael was divided, and after it was conquered, after it was divided? Why does Rashi have to get involved and push off the bringing of Bikurim, the simcha which a Yid has by bringing of Bikurim, to push it off that it happened 14 years later? Furthermore, we know that parts of Eretz Yisrael, Yidden took over right away. For example, Yericho. Yericho, the Yidden conquered as soon as they entered Eretz Yisrael. They conquered it very easily, just with the blowing of the shofar. And that is when they had Yericho fully in their hands. Even if we were to talk about dividing Eretz Yisrael, so we see that the Yidden committed to the Bnei Yisrael that should they come along and join Yisrael's children, should they come along and join them in Eretz Yisrael, they will give them a part of Eretz Yisrael. So, it's like at the same time when they were ready to go in, they immediately committed a part of Eretz Yisrael to somebody, to the Bnei Yisrael. So what the Rebbe is like asking, so we have a conquering of Eretz Yisrael, not the whole Eretz Yisrael, but a part of it, and a dividing, theoretically at least, of a part of Eretz Yisrael. In other words, assigning a part of Eretz Yisrael to somebody, which was at the same time as soon as the Yidden entered Eretz Yisrael. So again, why did they have to wait 14 years until they were able to bring Bikurim? Furthermore, the pasuk should have stressed it. If it's like Rashi says, then what gedacht stein in pasuk, v'hoya kisavei la'aretz, v'yarishta, v'yashafta ba, and that is the one when you will bring Eretz Yisrael. Besides v'yarishta, v'yashafta ba, the pasuk should also stress the fact that after you have inherited it and taken it over fully, and this is not what the pasuk stresses. The Rebbe says, at the time when the Rebbe is telling this to Moshe Rabbeinu, could be that if Moshe Rabbeinu would have brought the Yidden into Eretz Yisrael, then could be it would have been Takavat. L'poyel, in other words, actually wound up being that Moshe was not the one that led him into Eretz Yisrael. Could be if Moshe would have led him into Eretz Yisrael, it would have been in such a way that immediately they would have had begun the mitzvah of Bikur. But again, Rashi is not learning this way. So the Rebbe is explaining, because Rashi's derech is, Rashi has to introduce something new. Rashi is not telling us the Taich of the words. If Rashi would be telling us the Taich of the words, then Rashi would have been saying something on every word in Chumash, which Rashi is not. Rashi is just introducing something where there's room, where there's need to understand and give us an explanation of the meaning. So Rashi does not exclude the fact that we could learn the way we just discussed. Rashi is just adding on, in addition, that there's also room to say that when were the Yidden obligated in bringing the Bikurim, once they were fully settled on Eretz Yisrael. But Rashi is not shoylel, which means Rashi does not go against learning. Rashi, we could learn also on the Pshat. The pasuk could also be learned. Don't forget, we're learning Chumash, we're not learning Halach. So as far as learning the Chumash to explain the pasuk could lend itself to be explained also that as soon as the Yidden had any part of Eretz Yisrael, they were able to bring Bikurim. But Rashi is telling us there's another way of learning it, that when did they bring Bikurim? Once they had full control of Eretz Yisrael, and Eretz Yisrael was fully divided. The Rebbe refers, there's a famous expression from the Tzemach Tzedek. And Chassid once came to the Tzemach Tzedek and told him that he wants to go to Eretz Yisrael, he wants to move to Eretz Yisrael. So the Tzemach Tzedek told him, found it in Yiddish, Mach da Eretz Yisrael. Which means, Eretz Yisrael, what's Eretz Yisrael? Eretz Yisrael has a tremendous amount of Kedusha. So the Tzemach Tzedek told this Yid, try and accomplish here, where you are, the same thing which you would get in Eretz Yisrael. What's the pshat Eretz? See, this explains at length what's the meaning of Eretz. Eretz Yisrael. Eretz stems from the word sher, of rotzon, will, desire. Sher rotzesel lasos rotzoin koino. The land was willing to fulfill the wish of its master. In fact, we're talking about the Hoya Kisava Yala Aretz. Rebbe also mentioned it today. There's a famous sicha from the Frierdiker Rebbe that it was once on a Chai Elul, and in that year Chai Elul came out to be on a Shabbos in the year Tafrei Shnin Beis. And then the Rebbe Rashab had Frierdiker Rebbe's father had an Aliyas neshama, and his neshama went into Gan Eden. And he entered the Heichal of the Baal Shem Tov. And being that Chai Elul is the Baal Shem Tov's day, it's the Baal Shem Tov's birthday, so he heard from the Baal Shem Tov 7 Teires, 7 Inyonim in Teire on that Chai Elul. of which several have a shayches. It was Shabbos Parshas Kisavai, of which several have a shayches taka to the first pasuk of the Sedre, v'hoyo Kisavai ala Aretz, and the Baal Shem Tov also their basis is taich on Aretz. As we're discussing now, Eretz comes from the word of rotzon, desire. The land has given in, has had its desire to fulfill the wish of its master. Rebbe Rashab later related it to the Frierdiker Rebbe, and the Frierdiker Rebbe relates it to the Sikh. I'm going back to the Aliyas and Neshama. He describes in full detail that there were certain Torahs which the Baal Shem Tov said when all of his Talmidim were present. Men, women, and children. And there are some Torahs which he said only for very few people, and he describes there were certain Torahs which he said on Friday night, certain Torahs which he said on Shabbos by day. It's related in full detail in the Sichos of the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Rebbe spoke about it many times already, and today also referred to it. Getting back to our Inyan, so when we're talking now about the concept of Bikurim, which means the first of fruits that grows in Eretz Yisrael has to be brought to Hashem. So when we're talking about Eretz Yisrael, beruchni, spiritual Eretz Yisrael, based on the concept of Machda Eretz Yisrael, here we mean the fact that the desire, the inner desire of fulfilling the wish of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the same idea, just like by Bikurim. What's the type of Bikurim? We take the fruit that grows first and we give it to the Rebbe. The same thing when we wake up. What is the first thing we do in the morning? We thank the Rebbe for returning our soul to us. A person realizes that his thoughts and his talking and his act, his complete machshava, dibur u'maaseh, have to be different. Why? Because he is lefanecha. He's standing in front of the Rebbeinu Shalom. True, it's explained in Chassidus that it's hard for a person to control his machshavas, his thoughts, but at least as far as dibur u'maaseh, as far as his speech and his act and deed, this is something which can be fully controlled by a person. And when he realizes that he's standing in front of the Rebbe, especially when he rises in the morning, when we wake up in the mornings and we express Moida Ani Lefanecha, this already has an effect on the entire day. And when a person realizes that just like he sees, looks around in the world and he sees that there's the tzeimeach, the things that grow, and then there are the chai, all the lebedike behemoths, and he sees how they grow constantly. So this brings him the thought that he himself also has to be a mehalech, also has to constantly keep on going, mechayil al-chayil, from step to step. So the concept of Bikurim and Ruchnius and the Vahachayit and the Liber the Rebbe is bringing out. The Rebbe is bringing it out that what it really means, just like the first of fruits has to be given to the Rebbe, it's the same way the first part of the day, as soon as we wake up in the morning, we have to express our thanks to the Rebbe, Meidani Lefanecha. And the person has to realize that all the Priya Adama, all the fruit and all the accomplishments and achievements, whatever we have, or whatever we gain throughout the day, it's Hashem Elekecha Noisen Loch, just like the pasuk by Bikurim uses the expression that a person realizes that Hashem Elekecha Noisen Loch, the same thing, we realize that all our materialism, all our gashmis which we have gained and we've been successful, it's all thanks to the Rebbe Hashem Elekecha Noisen Loch. Pasuk Taka says, "V'lokachta," you shall take. In other words, it depends on you, it depends on the person. We are given the task, and we have to harav, and we have to put our koiches into it, but at the same time we have to know who is the one that's giving it. It's coming from the Rebbe. The Rebbe here again concluded that we have to be b'simcha. The importance of being b'simcha, and the Rebbe says he looks around on the audience and he's not getting a smile from anybody. He doesn't see a shmeichel on anybody. So he says he's not going to say that people are ungeblosen. Ungeblosen in Yiddish means angry, but whatever everyone probably is ernst. People are serious. Why are they serious? Because they want that they're demanding Mashiach should come. And they're serious because Shchinta begalusa, the Shchinta is in Galus that long. This puts people into a mood of seriousness. But the truth is that we should know that what will bring Mashiach through Simcha. Here the Rebbe again spoke that this year year of Tismach, year of Tisamach,
very special year. It was a successful year, the Rebbe says. It was a year of Hatzlacha. It says he's not predicting things for the future. He's not one that says Asidos. It says in Shulchan Aruch and Svarim, it's brought a question if it's permitted to go to somebody that predicts what will be in the future. It's a shayla on halacha. It says, and naturally we're talking about somebody that tells the truth. Because for somebody that doesn't say the truth, then it's not even a shayla on halacha, then it's a waste of money, it's a waste of everything. We're not talking about somebody that just lies. But even somebody that does say the truth, it's a question that's debatable in halacha. But we're not getting into that. What's negeya us, the Rebbe concluded, is that this was a year, successful year, hatzlachadik year. The Rebbe says, you saw many inyonim, tremendous hatzlacha, and that is why we should still chaparayim the remainder of the year. And again, it's the year of simcha, year of tismach and tisamach. The Rebbe urged that we know that wine brings to simcha, yayin is misameach alakim hanoshim, the pasuk says, but it's not only yayin. We know there are other mashkoyes, other liquids which also can bring to simcha. So by saying l'chaim and other mashkoyes which bring to simcha, it will lead to a simcha, and again stressing the importance of simcha. Second sikha, the Rebbe begins that in simcha there are various things which bring a person to simcha. As we mentioned earlier, there is wine which affects a person, and yayin can bring him to simcha. Then we know that when a person gets a new garment, a person gets a beged chodesh. When he gets a beged chodesh, it also brings him to simcha. There's an inyan of simcha shel mitzvah. When we are involved in a mitzvah and we fulfill the mitzvah b'simcha, so that's called simcha shel mitzvah. Then there's also an inyan of a binyan shel simcha, a building which brings simcha. It's called a building of simcha. It says regarding garments, we cannot compare the simcha of a garment to the simcha of a house. A house, after all, has much more of an effect on the person. It's much more permanent. It's no way can it be compared to a beged. For example, we know that when the Yidden were in the mikvah, they had no problem with clothes because they had their clothes growing with them. And their clothes were protected through the clouds. The clouds protected the Yidden in the mikvah, protected their clothes as well. Still, this was not a level of nitzchias, a level of eternity. When did the Yidden reach to a level of eternity? When they entered Eretz Yisrael and they had the Beis Hamikdash with them. They had the Beis Hamikdash and they were housed. And when a person has his house, I don't know if I mentioned it here, it's brought in, see this a lot, based on Chazal, that a shleimus to a person, a completeness to a person is when a person is set up in his house. There's an expression somewhere, a person without a house, it's lacking in the person. The person is affected by the fact if he doesn't have a house. And maybe when we're talking about a binyan, and a binyan shel simcha has an effect on a person. Especially when we're talking about houses which megadlim by Torah, megadlim by Tefillah, houses which are dedicated for davening and for learning and for the acts of tzedakah v'chesed. So these are definitely houses that bring simcha. And the Rebbe says, especially when we are coming, that within these days we had the groundbreaking for the house of Nasi Dereinu. 770 is the place where the Rebbe refers to the Friedrich Rebbe, which is where he lived for a period of his last 10 years of his life. That is where he lived there, in something which has a shaykhs to a Nasi. And we know what Rashi tells us on behalf of Chazal, that HaNasi hu HaKoyel, that a Nasi has a shaykhs with it. Nasi is everyone. And again, especially that this took place in the year of Tismach, even though the full title of the year is Hey Tismach, it's 5,748. But even in halacha, when we want to write the year could be written without the Hey. And for all legal purposes of a legal document, it carries the validity if the Hey is not mentioned, and all we write is Tavshim Memches. Even by Chassidim, we also know when Chassidim refer to Amorim, which was said by the previous Rabbeim,
there's some very famous mamorim which was said in long continuations, big mamorim, for example, the Hemshech which the Rebbe Rashab said in the year Tafresh Samach Vav, or the Hemshech of Tafresh Ayin Beis. And whenever you want to refer to an Inyan Chassidus which is explained in that Hemshech, we also say explained in Tafresh Samach Vav or Tafresh Ayin Beis, not getting involved, hey Tafresh Samach Vav or hey Tafresh Ayin Beis. So this is the year of Tismach, and this is the year which demands for Simcha. And therefore the Rebbe is urging that we should try and accomplish anything possible in the area of building, again, whether it is a private building or a public building, in other words, something for a tzibur, or it's something for personal use. Anything that can be completed within this year is extremely advisable. Especially in this Shabbos, when this is discussed, this is the Shabbos of Slichas. So the question arises, why is this Shabbos called Shabbos Slichas? On Shabbos, we're not allowed to say Slichas. So Slichas, you say, Mitzvah Shabbos. And on Shabbos, you didn't even say the Slichas yet. When do you say the Slichas? You first say it Matzah Shabbos. And besides, it's just mentioned the concept of Shabbos and the concept of Slichas are contradictory, because on Shabbos, we don't say Slichas. So we could say Pshat, that the koyach of saying Slichas, the strength for it, we get from Shabbos. Especially as we will say tonight in Slichas, we will say B'moitzoi Menucha. One of the main pieces of tonight's Slichas begins B'moitzoi Menucha. Menucha is Shabbos, which means Moitzoi is Shabbos. So from Shabbos we get the koyachas to say Slichas. The clouding of Slichas, where does the concept of Slichas stem from? It stems from that when the Rebbe gave Moshe Rabbeinu the second Luchos, that is when he told him, Salachti kidvarecha, he accepted Moshe's request, and the Rebbe forgave. So this is where the concept of Slicha originated. Chazal tell us, Ma Rishonim beratzain, Af Elu beratzain. Just like when the Rebbe gave the first set of Luchos, he gave it with his full desire and with his full will. So the same thing, the second ones are also with his desire and will. This Chazal, the Rebbe says, could be touched twofold. Could be touched, we say, just like the first ones, were with the full wish of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with the full will of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The second ones are also that way. So really, where was there more Ratzon of Hashem in the first one? We compare, we say the second are also is always a schwachere madrege, it's weaker than the original case. That's one way of learning it. Another way of learning, we know in Kedusha it's always Mailam B'Kodesh. We always go higher in Kedusha. So when we say Ma Rishonim Beratzain, just like the first ones had the desire of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Af Elu Beratzain. So there's the Madrega of Ratzon HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's in the second Luchos, is a bigger one than in the first Luchos. Since it's explained at length, that the second Luchos came as a result of tshuva. This is the whole milah, this is the whole advantage, what tshuva is all about. The whole accomplishment of tshuva. So Mamela, when we're talking now about slichos, which originates from the second Luchos, we're talking based on the second Taichema Rishonim Beratzon Afeilu Beratzain. So it's a real high madrege of the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the whole inyan of slichos. Getting back to our inyan, Rabbi says that it was already seen that those that were involved in building and started it, they were successful, and those that will start will also be successful, and the success will be a type of Lamayla Mederach HaTeva, above the ramification of Teva. Though we are not relying on Nisim, and we have a concept that we don't rely on a Nes. But when we're talking about Nisim, there are various levels in this. It's a famous expression from the Rebbe Marash that Parnose by a Yid today is compared to man. In other words, just like the man was a miracle, the same way the Rebbe helps us when we have Parnose, it can be compared to the man. So the man was a miracle, but on the other hand, it was a constant miracle. So we see that even in Lamayla Mederach HaTeva, even in the area of above the realm of nature, there are also inyanim that turn into a nes tmidi, to a constant nes. Not a one-time nes that happens something real out of the ordinary, but there are certain in Yonim that compared to Mam, compared to Parnassus, the Rebbe says the Rebbe should give that it should be in a success, and a success of Lamayla Mederech HaTeva, and this Lamayla Mederech HaTeva will bring a lot of Hatzlacha in the undertaking of the building. Of the urge that we see, the setup is that there are many people that they were involved in building buildings. And now the Hashgacha Pratis has let it that their panos is from different inyanim. But nonetheless, their experience or their expertise, as well as their contacts, they still have. So it's extremely advisable, the Rebbe says, everything is Hashgacha Pratis, to urge these people that they should also again get involved in building and utilize all their contacts and all their knowledge and all their experience and whatever they could only put to use, even their contacts with Yidden and with non-Yidden, no difference. As long as it could lead to success in the Indian of Bniyah, in the Indian of building, to see to utilize it and make use of it. And again, the Rebbe says we're talking about in Binyanim of Torah, Tefillah, and Chesed, and we're talking about private homes as well. Because the Rebbe says even a private home of a Yid is also a house of Kedusha. He mentioned that for the Frierdiker Rebbe, after he got married and he moved into his apartment, so the first thing he did before he began to live in his apartment is he brought the children from Cheder, that the children from Cheder should learn in the apartment for a certain period of time, for a couple of hours or so. What does this show? This shows us that how we can bring in the Kedusha of a house of Torah and of a house of Tefillah even to a private home as well. So this says that in this country, even though there are those husbands that feel that they can accomplish many things on their own without involving their wives, but nonetheless, when it comes to building something, comes to the Indian of building, that is usually when the wife gets involved and gives her share also in her advice and so forth as far as the building. And the husband would definitely consult her, because this is a major undertaking. And even if he doesn't, the wife on her own will not let him get by without herself getting involved and also putting in her share into the building, into the renovation, into the building. And the Meiler Rebbe says, especially, what does this bring out? It brings out that there are also women that they have their knowledge and their understanding for the Indian of building, especially in this city, in this huge city, which is the city where the Siddur Reinu, where the Frierdiker Rebbe lived, to utilize all contacts and always possible to come up with buildings and to begin in any way, in any shape possible, to begin the structure, again, whatever is possible to Chaparain in this year, in this special year of Tismach and Tesamach. The Rebbe says, Chabad is not the Indian of Chabad to say Musa, but he's just urging on this proper and this advisable thing to utilize this year, the remainder of this year, and we should not sleep when we sleep. Even though a person, when he sleeps, is fully responsible for himself, but at the same time, heißt es geschlafen. So we should not sleep, but we should be awake and responsive and chaparein, whatever possible, and these inyanim of biniyah, of building public binyanim, as well as also private binyanim. Then the Rebbe urged, and in Inyan which the Rebbe says he has spoken about also on previous occasions, that we are several days before Rosh Hashanah. We have to see to it that Rosh Hashanah should be able to be celebrated by every Jew to the fullest extent as Rosh Hashanah should be celebrated. And regarding Rosh Hashanah, it's brought in Svarim, Ichlu mashmanim, ushtu mamtakim, that we should eat fat foods, delicacies food, and drink sweet drinks. In other words, that everybody should really be able to rejoice and have a proper festive meals, and meals that are suitable for the Yontif. So Mamela, it's our responsibility to see to it that all Yidden have their means so that they're able to celebrate Yontif properly. The Rebbe says we're not going to complain about what was not accomplished until now. Because Chazal tell us, "Ein tzayikin ala ava," we don't scream about the past, so we're not going to complain for the fact that we are already three weeks in Elul, and checks of tzedakah which should have been distributed were not distributed yet. We're not going to talk about that, but we're just going to ask, at least for the future, to make sure that we see to it that all Yidden really are in a position of rejoicing properly and enjoying properly the Yontif. Rabbi mentioned here that today we will be reciting Pirkei Avos, Perik 3 and Perik 4. Gimel Daled. Gimel Daled means Gemoyel Dalim. To do chesed, to do a Gemillas chesed, Dalim with the poor. Rabbi elaborated that when a person does not have his means to be able to celebrate a Yontif properly, it definitely interferes with his menuchas hanefesh, with the peacefulness of his mind and of his soul, and at the same time affects his fulfillment of all the inyanim that have to be fulfilled during these days, the Torah mitzvahs that have to be done during the days of Rosh Hashanah, during the month of Tishrei. So therefore it's extremely advisable to see to it that we extend a helping hand to anyone who we only think is in need of assistance, so that he too will be able to have the peace of mind and be able to rejoice properly and enjoy properly the days of Yontif, beginning from Rosh Hashanah and the entire month of Yontif. It's customary in the Farbrengen that the Rebbe also explains a halach in the Rambam. Today's Shia, the Rambam discusses the halachas of Tumah for a keli, for a vessel. And it's a question of a keli shenigmara betaro, a keli which was tired, and then the keli broke, or a keli which loy nigmara tzorasai, a keli which is not complete yet. It's not a complete keli; it wasn't finished yet, and the question arises if it receives tumah or it doesn't receive tumah. The halacha is that a keli which was not complete yet is not mekabel tumah. The Rebbe explained in the Ruchni is what do we mean a keli which was not complete yet? It refers to Yidden. Yidden we are not whole and complete. Why? Because we're in Golus. And being that we're in Golus, we're not nigmat tzorasai. We're not complete yet. So we have to know that Yidden being in Golus, and this keli breaks. What's the pshat? This keli breaks because we're broken from Golus. And at the same time, we have to know a keli which is not complete, and it breaks, it is not mekabel tumah, meaning Yidden. We are not complete, we're not whole and complete, we are in Golus, and we are broken from Golus. The darkness of Golus affects us, that it breaks us. But at the same time, we should know that this keli, this vessel, does not accept tumah. In other words, whatever Yidden go through, all the being broken and of Golus and being incomplete because we are in Golus, but at the same time, we should know that tumah, it does not attach. It does not become united with Tumah. A Yid remains tahir, a Yid at all times. A Yid at all times remains pure. The Rebbe concluded the Farbrengen, the Rebbe usually does, reminding us to make a bracha achreina, and at the same time said, let it be a bracha achreina on the Golus, that we are finishing the Golus. Rebbe again said that being that, mentioned earlier, that they are drink yayin, which is v'sameich elakim v'anoshim. The Rebbe said he himself will say l'chayim, and urged everybody to follow him. Mimeni yiru v'chein yasu, to do what he did, and everybody should say l'chayim and should bring to a ksiva v'chsima toiva. The year should be, the oncoming year should be a healthy, good, blessed year, and the coming of Mashiach through simcha to take us out of Golus. Amen. And a ksiva v'chsima toiva.